Time skip. Underpass to runway. Steve, in his uniform, strides through an underpass, then jogs onto a private runway, heading for a grounded chopper. An electro-disabler slams onto the chopper, and Steve looks up. Iron Man and War Machine decent. Wow, it's so weird how you run into people at the airport. Don't you think that's weird? Tony asked. Definitely weird, Rhodey said. Hear me out, Tony. That doctor, the psychiatrist, he's behind all of this, Steve said. T'Challa leaps over a truck. Captain, T'Challa said. Your Highness, Steve said. Anyway, Ross gave me 36 hours to bring you in. That was 24 hours ago. Can you help a brother out? Tony said. You're after the wrong guy, Steve said. Your judgment is askew. Your old war buddy killed innocent people yesterday, Tony said. And there are 5 more super soldiers just like him. I can't let the doctor find them first, Tony. I can't, Steve said. Steve, you know what's about to happen. Do you really want to punch your way out of this one? Natasha asked. All right, I've run out of patience. Underoos, Tony shouted. Peter shoots a web, stealing Steve's shield and binding his hands. Layla shouted, eyes wide. You brought a fucking child? Pietro zips up next to her in a blur, stopping at her side with a scoff. He's even smaller up close. Stark, you sure this isn't bring your sidekick to work day? Pietro asked. Tony ignores them as he says to Peter, Nice job, kid. Thanks. Well, I could have stuck the landing a little better. It's just the new suit. Well, it's nothing, Mr. Stark. It's perfect. Thank you, Peter said as he slightly stuttered. Yeah, we don't really need to start a conversation, Tony said. Okay, Captain. Big fan, I'm Spider-Man, Peter said. Spider-Man? More like Stark's liability. Layla muttered to Steve. I give him 2 minutes before he's eating floor. Pietro grinned. Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Just ... Tony said. Hey, everyone, Peter said. Good job, Tony said. You've been busy, Steve said. And you've been a complete idiot, dragging in Clint, rescuing Wanda from a place she doesn't even want to leave. A safe place. I'm trying to keep you from tearing the Avengers apart, Tony said. You did that when you signed, Steve said. Layla steps forward, voice firm. You really want to lecture us about tearing things apart when you just dragged a high schooler into a war zone? Pietro added with a smirk. And, newsflash, Stark, you don't run the Avengers. Tony's visor tilts toward them, but he doesn't answer. All right, we're done. You're going to turn Barnes over. You're going to come with us now because it's us, or a squad of JSOC guys, with no compunction about being impolite, Tony said, and he notices Steve looking to the side before adding, Come on. We found it. They're Quinjets in Hangar 5, North Runway, Sam said through a radio. Steve holds his hands up and Clint shoots the web off. All right, Lang, Steve said. Hey, guys, something, Peter said. Whoa, what the hell was that? Rhodey asked, and I believe this is yours, Captain America, Scott said as he returns the shield to Steve. Not bad for the new guy. Layla smirks at Scott. Cute trick. I've got one faster. Pietro zipped by Scott with a grin. Oh, great. All right, there's 2 on the parking deck. One of them's Maximoff. I'm going to grab her. Rhodey, you want to take Cap? Tony asked. Got 2 in the terminal, Wilson and Barnes, Rhodey said. Barnes is mine, T'Challa shouted, and Steve hits Rhodey with his shield. Hey, Mr. Stark, what should I do? Peter asked. What we discussed. Keep your distance, web 'em up, Tony said. Move, Captain. I won't ask a second time, T'Challa said. The fight breaks out. Pietro blurs past War Machine, knocking his aim off. Too slow, Tin Man, Pietro shouted as he zips off. "Look, I really don't want to hurt you," Scott said to Natasha. "I wouldn't stress about it," Natasha said before she kicks him in the groin and he miniaturizes, throwing her head over heels. She zaps him off her wrist and he slams into a nearby truck, leaving a small dent. Bucky threw a punch at Peter, who caught his fist. "You have a metal arm? That is awesome, dude!" Peter exclaimed. Sam landed a hit on Peter's side. "You have the right to remain silent," he said, firing his wings in reverse to dodge. Pietro zipped in front of Tony, grabbing his wrist mid-repulsor blast. "Too slow, Tin Man," he taunted. "And you're still cocky," Tony shot back, yanking free. Laila vaulted onto War Machine's back, locking an arm around his neck and slamming her heel into his thruster pack. Rhodey stumbled in the air, giving Steve the opening to kick him down hard. "Seriously?" Rhodey shouted. "What? You're heavier than you look," Laila said, twirling her knife before throwing it into the dirt beside him. Clint spotted the Quinjet and pointed. "There's our ride!" "Come on!" Steve called, waving for the others as Laila covered their retreat, firing a final burst of shots to slow down the advance. Steve's team runs toward the Quinjet. A fizzing stream of energy slices across the runway, and they stop as Vision hovers overhead. "Captain Rogers," Vision called down calmly, "I know you believe what you're doing is right, but for the collective good, you must surrender, now." Tony's team arrived from the opposite side, their formation tightening. Steve's jaw clenched. "We fight," he said simply. "This is gonna end well," Natasha Romanoff muttered dryly. "They're not stopping," Peter Parker called from behind his mask as the teams closed the distance. "Neither are we," Tony Stark replied, his tone sharp as his helmet sealed. Everyone broke into a sprint. Steve blocked a punch as Iron Man landed in front of him. Clint Barton loosed an arrow toward Vision, while War Machine banked after Falcon. Bucky traded savage blows with T'Challa. An explosive arrow detonated near Iron Man, making him stagger. Natasha vaulted Scott Lang into the fray, just as Peter swung past, dodging vehicles hurled by Wanda. Near the baggage trolleys, Laila was already in motion. She ducked under a swing from one of Tony's ground supports, slammed her pistol slide into his jaw, and whipped her boot knife into her left hand. One fluid motion, slash, kick, elbow, and he was down. "You could at least try to keep them breathing, Laila," Steve called over his shoulder as he blocked another strike. "They'll live," Laila said, firing 2 precise shots into the ground near another soldier's feet to trip him up. "Probably." Clint pinned Natasha to the ground with his bow. "We're still friends, right?" Natasha asked through laboured breaths. "Depends on how hard you hit me," Clint replied. Before Natasha could retaliate, her foot froze mid-kick, glowing red. Wanda shoved her to the tarmac. "You were pulling your punches," Wanda said coolly. Clint gave her a sheepish nod. Bucky and T'Challa had each other by the throat. "I didn't kill your father," Bucky said between gritted teeth. "Then why did you run?" T'Challa demanded, spinning and fly-kicking Bucky away. He raised his claws for a killing blow, but Wanda halted his hand and threw him into a passenger gangway. On the left flank, Laila caught a glimpse of Pietro dodging in and out of enemy lines. "You're showing off," she called, spinning her pistol on her finger, before holstering it mid-run. She drew her other knife and shoulder-checked Peter Parker, hard enough to send him tumbling. "Hey!" Peter exclaimed, scrambling to his feet. "Mr. Stark didn't say anything about you." "And you're still here, why?" Laila asked, lunging. Peter backflipped, shooting webs at her feet. She slid under them, firing a burst from her sidearm that forced him to the rafters. "Stay on the swings, kid," she called after him. Steve broke Peter's web with his shield. "That thing does not obey the laws of physics at all," Peter said, staring at it. "Look, kid," Steve said, breathless but calm. "There's a lot going on here that you don't understand." "Mr. Stark said you'd say that," Peter replied. Wow! He fired webs at Steve's shield and ankle, yanking him forward. Steve spun, using the momentum to somersault and send Peter sprawling. Sam zigzagged through blasts from Iron Man. "Clint, can you get him off me?" Sam asked. "Buckled in?" Clint asked Scott Lang, who was miniaturized on the arrow tip. "Yeah, no, I'm good. Let's go," Scott yelled. As Clint fired, Iron Man's repulsors shattered the arrowhead, but Scott slipped inside the suit. Steve caught another of Peter's webs and yanked, knocking the kid down with his shield. "Stark, tell you anything else?" Steve asked. "That you're wrong. You think you're right. That makes you dangerous," Peter said before leaping in again. "Guess he had a point," Steve replied, collapsing the gangway Peter was on. Tony took hits from Clint's arrows, frowning. "Friday?" "We have some weapon systems offline," Friday reported. "They what?" Tony asked, incredulous. From inside, Scott's voice echoed. "It's your conscience. We don't talk a lot these days." Near the cargo loaders, Laila had a new problem. Vision descended toward her. "Miss Jenkins," he said, voice unshaken, "your abilities make you a significant threat. Please stand down." "Not gonna happen, Tin Halo," Laila said, spinning and launching a knife toward his shoulder. It phased through harmlessly. Vision frowned. "You anticipated that would work?" "Nope," Laila said, drawing her pistols and firing at his feet to distract him as Pietro rammed him from the side at super speed. "But I knew he'd be here." Scott Lang grew to giant size, yanking War Machine out of the air. "Holy shit!" Peter exclaimed. "Way to go, Tic-Tac!" Sam shouted. As Vision blasted apart a collapsing control tower, Wanda struggled to hold it back. War Machine targeted her with a sonic disruptor, making her cry out. "Go!" Natasha barked, stunning T'Challa as Steve and Bucky sprinted for the Quinjet. Pietro zipped in front of Laila, blocking her path for a heartbeat. "You going with them?" he asked, scanning her expression. "Damn right I am," Laila said, snapping her magazine into place with a sharp click. She took off at a run beside Steve and Bucky, firing over her shoulder to keep the opposition at bay. "Don't get killed," Pietro called, darting away toward another skirmish. Laila smirked mid-stride. "Not in the plan, Speedy," she shouted back before sliding into the hangar entrance, covering Steve and Bucky as they made for the Quinjet. Outside, Vision kneels beside Wanda and gently holds her in his arms. She pants for breath. "I'm sorry," Vision said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "Me too," Wanda replied, shaking her head as if she'd failed them both. "It's as I said," Vision murmured. "Catastrophe." In the Quinjet cockpit, Steve gripped the controls tightly. Laila was in the co-pilot seat, scanning the sky through the side window, while Bucky kept watch from the back. Steve glanced over his shoulder, spotting War Machine closing in fast from the right. He pushed the thrusters forward. "Rhodey's on us," Laila reported, tracking his trajectory. "Iron Man's with him, Falcon's behind." "Hang on," Steve said, focusing on their course. Outside, Iron Man flew beside War Machine while Falcon followed. "Vision, I got a bandit on my 6, James Rhodes said over comms. Falcon's voice came in sharp. "Copy that!" He fired small explosives, the bursts rocking War Machine's flight path. "Vision!" Rhodes barked. "Target his thrusters! Turn him into a glider!" From the Quinjet, Laila saw the faint glow building in the distance. "Oh no!" she muttered. "Steve, Vision's charging up!" "Sam, move!" Steve called into the comm, but it was already too late. Vision's beam tore through the air. Falcon tucked into a desperate tumble, and the blast overshot, slamming into the core on War Machine's chest plate. "Rhodey!" Tony shouted as War Machine spiraled out of control. "I'm flying dead stick," Rhodes said, voice shaking as black smoke billowed from his suit. Laila winced, watching from the Quinjet window. That hit took out everything. He's not gonna stabilize. Tony and Falcon dove after him. Rhodes's eyes fluttered shut just before his armor smashed into a grassy field. "Rhodes!" Tony roared, landing beside him. His helmet retracted as he tore the faceplate from Rhodey's armor, revealing blood and an unresponsive expression. "Read vitals," he demanded. "Heartbeat detected," Friday replied. "Emergency medical is on its way." Sam landed, folding his wings away. "I'm sorry," he said sincerely, only to be blasted backward by Tony's repulsor without warning. "Tony!" Laila exclaimed over comms, gripping the edge of her seat, but Tony didn't respond. Vision glided to the ground in front of Sam, his expression heavy with guilt, while Tony stayed on his knees, holding Rhodes as if the rest of the battle didn't exist. Steve piloted the Quinjet toward the jagged silhouettes of the mountains ahead. The hum of the engines was the only sound for a long stretch. Bucky sat behind him, shoulders tense, while Laila occupied the co-pilot seat, quietly checking their heading. "What's going to happen to your friends?" Bucky asked, his voice low but heavy with concern. Steve didn't answer right away, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He let out a long sigh, his hands tightening on the controls. "Whatever it is, I'll deal with it," he said finally, the weight in his tone matching the hard set of his jaw. Bucky looked down at his hands, frowning. "I don't know if I'm worth all this, Steve." Steve glanced at him in the rearview mirror, shaking his head. "What you did all those years, it wasn't you. You didn't have a choice." Bucky's voice was almost a whisper. "I know, but I did it." Laila turned in her seat to face him, her gaze sharp but steady. "And now you're trying to make it right," she said firmly. "That's the choice you have now, Barnes. Don't waste it by doubting yourself." Bucky met her eyes for a moment before looking away, the silence between them carrying more than words. Steve brings the Quinjet in to land beside Zemo's Caterpillar truck on the remote, icy mountaintop. The wings fold in tight beside the fuselage. Bucky was already at the weapons rack marked Romanoff, pulling out a light machine gun. Laila stood beside him, checking over the twin pistols strapped to her thighs before slinging a compact rifle across her back. "You remember that time we had to ride back from Rockaway Beach in the back of that freezer truck?" Steve asked from the cockpit, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Was that the time we used our train money to buy hot dogs?" Bucky replied, glancing up. "You blew $3 trying to win that stuffed bear for a redhead," Steve said, walking toward them. Bucky frowned thoughtfully. "What was her name again?" "Dolores. You called her Dot," Steve said. Bucky huffed out a dry laugh. "She's got to be 100 years old right now." "So are we, pal," Steve replied, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "Speak for yourselves," Laila cut in, smirking as she checked the safety on her rifle. "I'm not taking credit for your antique status." Now, wearing his helmet, Steve walked with Bucky and Laila to the entrance carved into the rock. The heavy door stood ajar. "He can't have been here more than a few hours," Steve said, stepping forward cautiously. "Long enough to wake them up," Bucky muttered grimly. "Or to set a trap," Laila added, scanning the surrounding snow and jagged cliffs. They descended into the bunker in a caged elevator. The clang of machinery echoed in the depths. When it stopped, Steve nodded to Bucky, then heaved the cage door open. Laila swung out first, rifle up, and took the left flank. Bucky readied the machine gun, while Steve moved up the right, shield raised. They hugged the wall, Laila's eyes flicking to each shadowed corner. Bucky checked an alcove full of rusted gear before following Steve up the stairs. A loud thud snapped all three of them around, weapons raised toward the corridor. "You ready?" Steve asked, shifting his shield. "Yeah," Bucky answered. "Born ready," Laila said, bracing her rifle. The double doors were forced open, and Iron Man stepped through. Steve blinked in surprise. Tony retracted his helmet. "You seem a little defensive," Tony remarked. Steve stepped forward, shield up, while Bucky kept his gun trained on Tony. Layla didn't lower her weapon either, eyes narrowed. "It's been a long day," Steve said. "At ease, soldier," Tony said, glancing at Bucky. "I'm not currently after you." "Then why are you here?" Steve asked. "Could be your story's not so crazy," Tony admitted. "Maybe. Ross has no idea I'm here and I'd like to keep it that way. Otherwise, I've got to arrest myself." "Well, that sounds like a lot of paperwork," Steve said, lowering his shield. "It's good to see you, Tony." "You too, Cap," Tony replied before looking at Bucky. "Hey, Manchurian candidate, you're killing me here. There's a truce. You can drop." Steve signed for Bucky to lower his weapon. He did. Layla, however, kept hers up a moment longer, eyes flicking between Tony and the shadows. "Truce or not," she said, lowering it slowly. "I'm not turning my back until we know why we're here." The three of them followed Tony cautiously. T'Challa, in full Black Panther suit, watched from around a corner, silent. Helmet re-engaged, Tony led them into a vast chamber lined with capsules. "I've got heat signatures," Tony said. "How many?" Steve asked. One." The lights flared on, hazy yellow mist curling inside the capsules. As well as Joseph, each held an enhanced soldier from the 1991 experiment. "If it's any comfort, they died in their sleep," Zemo's voice echoed over the speaker. All of them had been shot in the head. Bucky's grip tightened on his gun. "What the hell?" "I'm grateful to them, though," Zemo continued. "They brought you here." Steve hurled his shield toward the control room's window, but it bounced back. "Please, Captain," Zemo said. "The Soviets built this chamber to withstand the launch blast of UR-100 rockets." "I'm betting I could beat that," Tony said. "Oh, I'm sure you could, Mr. Stark," Zemo replied. "Given time. But then you'd never know why you came." "You killed innocent people in Vienna just to bring us here?" Steve demanded. "I thought about nothing else for over a year. I studied you. I followed you," Zemo said. "But now that you're standing here, I just realized there's a bit of green in the blue of your eyes. How nice to find a flaw." "You're Sokovian," Steve said. "Is that what this is about?" "Sokovia was a failed state long before you blew it to hell," Zemo replied. "Number, I'm here because I made a promise." "You lost someone?" Steve asked, watching him closely. "I lost everyone," Zemo said, "and so will you." A screen flickered to life, showing surveillance footage labelled December 16th, 1991. Steve stepped toward it. Layla froze beside him, recognizing the date from classified files she'd seen. "An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again," Zemo said, "but one which crumples from within, that's dead. Forever." Tony's gaze locked on the image of a snow-covered road. "I know, that road. What is this?" he demanded, his voice suddenly unsteady.